What's up guys, LeopoldTheBrave here, and what have I gotten myself into? Well, some things are going on in my personal life that are kinda changing how I'm able to do videos. In other words, I won't be able to do them as much. So I just wanted to do one last giant video before things slow down. And this giant video is discussing my 100 favorite franchises. Video game franchises, movie franchises, TV show franchises, book franchises, all are included here. I just wanted to give some quick little thoughts on each of them while I still can, since the few videos I will be able to make after the schedule change will likely mostly be my versus content. And one last thing. Yes, these are all ranked, but just because something is at the very end of the list, it doesn't mean I hate it. Every single spot on this list is something that I love and adore. And there's even more that there wasn't any room for on the list. So if you see that your favorite thing in the whole wide world is only at 52 or 87 or something for me, don't get offended. That's still really good. Now let's begin. Number 100 is Cars. And we're already starting off weird, because this Pixar franchise in particular has quite a reputation of being their worst franchise. But I personally find it pretty fun, and I enjoy my own love of the series rather than following internet opinions. Cars 2 isn't nearly as bad as everyone says, and Cars 3 isn't nearly as decent as everyone says. And Mater is one of Pixar's funniest and most endearing characters they've ever made, and I genuinely don't understand how some people find him annoying. Number 99 is Rick and Morty. Not my most favorite adult cartoon, but I definitely think it's a bit overhated. Mostly due to its fan base. But if you just watch the show itself and don't pay attention to the fans, you'll see how creative and interesting and fun it is. While I do agree that the later seasons have gotten a bit too self-aware, and show that the writers obviously hate their fan base too, it's still at least entertaining. Number 98 is Guitar Hero. Now most rhythm and music games aren't really my thing, because I have terrible eyesight, so it's tricky to keep track of all those little symbols, and where they're going and where they're coming from, and when they're in the right position for you to get a perfect timing and all that. But Guitar Hero turned out to be a fun and simple gateway into that genre, and it introduced me to some of my favorite bands of all time. Yeah, the genre eventually got oversaturated, but it's been gone for a while now, so it'd be fine if it came back. 97 is Scooby-Doo. Now this is a timeless franchise, and one that's pretty hard to hate. Despite each reincarnation of the series not being quite as distinct from each other as something like, I don't know, the Ninja Turtles, it's still pretty rare for it to not be entertaining. I shockingly haven't seen any of the live-action movies for it yet, but I'm sure that when I get around to it, I'll enjoy those too. Number 96 is Clay World, and here we have our first YouTube franchise. I highly recommend it, it's extremely funny, and it's a true hidden gem of the early days of YouTube. It's a true shame that it didn't last longer, or that the creator never really bounced back after he ended it. But for what there is out there, it's still very entertaining and very rewatchable. I honestly can't think of a single other thing on YouTube that's this old but holds up this well. Number 95 is Final Fantasy. Now to be completely honest, I've only ever played the remake of Final Fantasy VII. Turn-based RPGs aren't really my thing, and when it went more action-oriented, I was all in. It's a very interesting story so far, and I can't wait to see more in part 2. And although I don't have much experience with the games, I do have a lot of experience with the characters, the many that appear in Kingdom Hearts, Noctis showing up in Tekken 7, and getting more of Cloud and Sephiroth in Super Smash Bros. 94 is Cuphead. I love old school rubber hose animation, and a game that pays homage to it sounds like a dream come true to me. I'm slowly making my way through the game right now, and it's a blast so far, but it's mainly the show carrying it for me. The animation is pure eye candy, the jokes are pretty funny, and it seems to be slowly developing a pretty interesting story, and I can't wait to see where it goes. 93 is Robotomy, and this is probably one of the most obscure franchises on this list. Back in the early days of Regular Show, Adventure Time, and Mad, Robotomy was there as a new series too, but it only lasted one season, which was unfortunate because it was hilarious and fun to watch. It had that same mature humor that Regular Show had, and in fact I think it even went a bit further. I highly recommend giving it a watch if you're able to find it. I'd put it much higher on this list if I could see more of what it could do. 92 is Gravity Falls. Now even though I made that disclaimer at the beginning that I love everything on this list, I still feel like putting Gravity Falls this low is gonna be a bit controversial. A lot of people seem to see Gravity Falls as Disney's best show, but I see it as something that walked so other shows could run. I still love it of course, it's hilarious, tells a great story, has loads of heartwarming moments, but it's still like 80% filler, which is a big deal for a show that's only 2 seasons. And it's the few plot-related episodes that carry the series for me. 91 is Amphibia, and this is like the opposite of Gravity Falls for me, where it's the plot-related episodes that I found to be just okay and pretty slow to get through, and the filler episodes that carry the show for me. I love all of these goofy little characters and watching them get into wacky situations. Marcy and Sprig were the best characters, Hop Pop was great too, of course. Learning about Thai culture through Anne was awesome. I still found it to be an amazing show, even if my expectations were a bit too high. 90 is Chowder. What a wacky, fun, colorful, and creative cartoon. I have nothing but positives to say about this show. It's extremely funny, I love all the different animation styles it uses, and it was the show that actually inspired me to want to be a voice actor. You know that scene where they run out of animation and they show the voice actors in the booth reading the lines? That was it, that was the moment. This is the first thing on the list that had a real effect on me in my personal life, so I've gotta remember it fondly for that. 89 is Samurai Jack. Now this is one of the cartoons that gives the best example of how animation can be pure art. It has a lot of slow and quiet scenes which normally would bore me, I have a pretty lousy attention span sometimes, but the atmosphere it built was enough to keep me hooked. Plus it has Aku. It's pretty hard for your show to fail when it has Aku. The action was great, you care about Jack's journey, and even the 5th season years later was fantastic. For the first half. The ending could have been better. 88 is The Fairly Odd Parents. Now of course the series nosedived in quality for that last handful of seasons, but the early seasons will always be fun to revisit. It's such a creative concept for a show, and they do so much with it, that so many of the episodes, quotes, and characters end up being some of the most memorable of all time. Ooh, especially that villainous teacher, Denzel Crocker. 87 is Captain Underpants. Growing up, I was fortunate enough to enjoy this book series before it was banned. From an outsider's perspective, when you see the title of this series as well as the crude illustrations, you'd assume it to be nothing but empty toilet humor. But it goes much deeper than that. It's more about the childlike innocence of finding that type of humor hilarious, instead of caring about everyone else's opinions of it being lowbrow. It gives a pretty wholesome message about liking what you like and not letting others change you. It had a pretty sick movie adaptation too. 86 is Tome. If Clayworld set the standard for how funny videos should be in the early days of YouTube, then this set the standard for storytelling. I know 2011 isn't exactly the earliest days of YouTube, but compared to where we are now, yeah, still feels pretty early. This series is full of lovable characters, the background music is pretty catchy, the animation is nice during the action scenes, and the show overall is packed with talented voice actors. It had a bit of an influence on my art style, and it's one of those hidden gems that I definitely recommend you check out. 85 is iCarly. It's one of the most memorable sitcoms from my childhood. Characters like Sam, Gibby, and Spencer carried the show for me, and I remember visiting the actual website quite a bit while the show was running. However, it's pretty hard to talk about or even rewatch the show today without acknowledging all the messed up stuff that went on behind the scenes. And there are some moments in the show where that stuff behind the scenes begins to peek through. But during the other times, the good times, it's still a fun ride. 84 is Danny Phantom. I believe it's the first action-oriented show I ever watched, and it was a good one, even if that 3rd season dropped the ball a bit. Nearly every single one of the villains we got in this series was super memorable, and the action scenes were pretty great too. Danny Phantom was also the first cartoon character I saw that actually looked like me. I have albinism, I was born with and still have white hair. And it was, and still is, pretty rare to see cartoon characters who aren't old people who have white hair too. It was a pretty nice feeling. 83 is Fortnite. Now this game has that it's popular so it's bad reputation, but no matter what others' opinions of it are, I always found it very enjoyable. It's an incredibly simple game, and because of that, people have found tons of creative ways to push the game to its limits. It also even rivals Super Smash Bros. With all of its crossovers at this point. Rick and Morty, DC, Marvel, Halo, Naruto, Walking Dead, Street Fighter, apparently it's gonna have Dragon Ball soon. It's just crazy. 82 is The Simpsons. I know this show has been going on for almost 35 years, and 20 of those years have been below average. But that still leaves a pretty good 15 years, which is much better than what a majority of other shows can accomplish. The Simpsons is still packed with so many rewatchable episodes, memorable moments, hilarious characters, and the influence it had on animation as a whole cannot be ignored. I'll always love this dysfunctional family. 81 is One Punch Man. This was the very first anime I was aware of and looking forward to before it even released. It's such a fun and creative concept, and the anime definitely lives up to that fun. I will admit though that I have been pretty lousy at keeping up with it. It kinda just became what it was parodying. I check up on the manga from time to time because of Versus stuff, but also just out of curiosity, and I do get a bit hooked back into it each time, but this is probably the best spot for it to be on the list. Number 80 is Doctor Who. Just pure sci-fi stupidity and fun. What I love about the show is how versatile it is. The entire cast will change every few seasons, yet it never manages to lose its feel or its vibe. I will admit I kind of fell off of it after Matt Smith the 11th Doctor left. The 12th one didn't really impress me, and I haven't heard any recent news to rope me back in. But who knows, maybe I'll check in randomly again like I do with One Punch Man and it'll rope me back in. 79 is Fall Guys. I found out about this game just a couple days before it released, so luckily I got to be there day one. And it was fun then, and it's still fun now. It's such a creative concept for a battle royale game, and just like Fortnite, it's packed with all kinds of creative crossovers. They even just did King of Fighters with Terry Bogard and Mai Shiranui. And also coming soon to the game is a round editor, where you can make your own maps and mini-games for Fall Guys. If there's one way to keep me roped into a game no matter what game it is, add a level builder. I am so excited. 78 is Pac-Man. Back where I used to live, we had an old school arcade with all the classics. It even had an old Tekken 2 and Mortal Kombat cabinets. And whenever we'd go, the first thing I'd do when getting there is check to make sure I still have the high score in both Duck Hunt and Miss Pac-Man. Just an addicting little franchise. It's not just the classic games though. Pac-Man also has some incredible 3D platformers, one of which is getting remastered this month. And he's also my main in Smash Brothers. So yeah, love me some Pac. 77 is Madagascar. Now this is just a goofy little trilogy. I've always loved its unique art style and character designs. When this film trilogy first started, it actually got pretty overlooked compared to DreamWorks' other big franchises. But Mort memes and King Julian memes aside, I'm glad that in recent years it's been getting the recognition it deserves. Also, the Penguin spin-off movie and TV series is pretty good, which is rare for sequels and spin-offs in general. Also, it had a pretty great PS2 game. This franchise just has a bunch to it, huh? 76 is Super Mario. Now Mario is pretty easy to bully. Because he's the most popular game, it's easy to call him generic and boring, and all that other stuff that typically follows being a mascot for one of the biggest companies in the world. But for me, it's kinda hard not to love Mario. The main series games, the party games, the kart racing games, the RPG games, all the others, there's just so much for everyone. I'm always happy to see his goofy little face pop up for a new installment, even if it's one that I'm not interested in. 75 is the Jeff Dunham specials. Jeff Dunham was one of the very first stand-up comedians I ever got introduced to. Even though I was way too young for his type of humor at the time, he used colorful puppets, so my parents figured it was okay to show me to him. But as I got older and got introduced to more stand-up comedians over time, I slowly began to realize that Jeff Dunham is actually one of the unfunniest comedians ever. But it's like, so unfunny that it actually is funny? It's kinda weird. And despite his routines being very hit or miss in terms of comedy, he's actually still a very talented ventriloquist. It's always interesting watching him do his work. And I'll always have a nostalgic soft spot for him. 74 is Futurama. From the creator of The Simpsons comes another super funny show with a lot more continuity. I like this show a lot. All of the future concepts are pretty interesting, most of the jokes land, all the characters are hilarious, and Fry is voiced by Billy West, who just has a very pleasing sound to listen to. Aside from the comedy though, just like The Simpsons, it also has a couple heartwarming episodes as well. I'm not sure how excited I am about the new episodes though, because even though the show's ended multiple times, the most recent ending feels the most final. But we'll see. Maybe it'll surpass expectations. 73 is No More Heroes. This was a game series I missed out on back when it first started on the Wii, but in the past couple years, they ported the first two games as well as made the third game for the Nintendo Switch, so I finally got to try it out, and it did not disappoint. Super duper funny, action-packed, and very creative. It has such a unique identity that you'd be able to identify it from any screenshot, no matter what it's of. It's such a shame Travis didn't get into Smash Bros though. Maybe next time. 72 is Teen Titans. Now, comic books and superheroes have always been something that have been oversaturated to me, not just with the MCU. Growing up, my parents loved those old Superman and Batman films, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, it was just everywhere. And then when the MCU finally did roll around, they dove in head first, right from the beginning. So, it's always been hard for me to get into superhero stuff because I've just been overly exposed to it. Teen Titans, however, is something else entirely. It has such a fun and unique identity that it was able to hook me no problem. I especially like how independent they made Robin. They went out of their way not to mention Batman, only giving brief hints now and then. Probably one of the most fun superhero shows ever, and I rewatch it all the time. 71 is Drake and Josh. Now this does have the same drawback as iCarly with the people behind the show, and in this case one of the actors too, Drake. But when you watch the show on its own and don't give support to those people, it's pretty good. It has loads of memorable episodes, one of my favorite being The Bet, and tons of creative and interesting side characters like Crazy Steve, Helen, Craig and Eric. And even to this day, this show is still very quotable. I also repeat things for emphasis. Emphasis! Number 70 is The Bernie Mac Show. This is a series I just stumbled upon while flipping through channels on a hotel TV on vacation. And it turned out to be a good choice because it's pretty funny, and Bernie Mac's stand-up routines are even funnier. I do have a pretty sad memory about this series though, because I remember when I was watching it for the first time in that hotel room, my dad walked in, saw him on the TV and said, "Oh yeah, he's pretty funny." Sad he died though. Like, okay, how am I supposed to laugh after that? But yeah, The Bernie Mac Show, I highly recommend you check it out. I don't hear people talk about it enough. 69 is the Ninja Turtles. Growing up in my time period, you were either a Transformers, Power Rangers, or Ninja Turtles person, and I was Ninja Turtles all the way. They had the best theme songs, they had the best comedy, and overall it was just the coolest concept out of all three of them. Also, it has the most creative potential. Each incarnation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series is completely different from each other. The 80s series, the 2000s series, the CG series, and now the rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm excited to see what they do next. I'm never gonna get tired of these heroes in a half shell. 68 is Call of Duty. The time that I got into this series was around the same time when the hate was at an all-time high. Everyone complaining about how it's the same game every year, just with different graphics and guns, complaining about how toxic the lobbies are. But I didn't care. It looked interesting to me, I gave it a shot, and I loved it. Black Ops 1 is my favorite, and surprisingly, I never ever occurred one of those toxic lobbies everyone complains about. I mean, I know they exist, there's videos on YouTube of them, but I never found any. So yeah, Call of Duty? Pretty fun. Even if the file sizes of the recent games are way too big for me to want to keep playing them. 67 is Home Movies. It's very simplistically animated, it has a very crude art style, but I love it. Things don't really get too crazy on this show, it's very slice of lifey. The main draw of it is the fact that most of the dialogue is completely improvised. The voice actors are just talking to each other as the characters. It feels so natural, it's entertaining to see just what pops into their minds. And at some moments it can even feel pretty wholesome. It's hard to believe sometimes that it's aimed at older audiences. Number 66 is The Boondocks, another Adult Swim show, and it's likely one of their funniest and best ones, period. It's full of social commentary, political, and current event humor, but unlike most other shows, it actually works here. The animation is also breathtaking a lot of the time. Usually with these older audience-oriented shows, you'd expect more crude drawings like the previous one I mentioned. But here, it's action-packed and anime-inspired. It's a shame the reboot was cancelled though, because we definitely still need the Boondocks these days. 65 is Street Fighter. Now 2D fighters aren't really my thing, I prefer 3D fighters, so don't expect to see too much more of these on the list, but there's a reason Street Fighter is one of the most iconic fighting games ever. Incredible gameplay, incredible music, and a super memorable cast of characters. Especially their main guy Ryu. It's actually impressive how versatile this guy is, he's in everything. He's like the Mickey Mouse of fighting games, and the idea of even having a Mickey Mouse of fighting games probably wouldn't occur to my mind if he didn't exist. And I can't wait to see him in Street Fighter 6. 64 is Soul Calibur. I just love fighting games in general, man. Now I'm not as knowledgeable or into the story and characters of Soul Calibur as I am with Street Fighter, but I just love how fun and smooth the gameplay and controls are, and it has the super in-depth character customization. Deep character customization or deep level customization are always key ways to getting me roped into your game. I already said that with Fall Guys, but just refreshing your memory. 63 is Ed, Edd n Eddy. Just a classic Cartoon Network show, one of their greats, and I enjoy it too. The cool thing about this show is that the cast of characters it has from the start is who we keep the entire time. We never see any adults, we never see any new guys show up. It's the same people in the same place for the entire series, and yet it never gets stale. The animation is so fun and creative and wild, the characters are so hilarious and well voiced, and it had one of the best series finales for any cartoon, period. Number 62 is The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Despite being one of the very first shows to make full use of CG animation, it somehow doesn't look too dated. Yeah, the liquids and waters look wrong and the rendering and lighting haven't aged too well, but at no point does the show look unappealing or like it couldn't pass if it came out today. Aside from its unique look, it's also a lot of fun. So many memorable episodes that are some of my favorite of any cartoon. A reboot or revival of the series has been teased and hinted at for ages, and I really hope we get to see it someday. 61 is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's a shame most people only remember this show for the catchy theme song and the dad episode, because the rest of the show is just as entertaining. Will Smith and James Avery are just the most fantastic actors. It had fun supporting cast members like Jazz and Jeffrey, and I love how the show wasn't afraid to just completely shatter the fourth wall and go crazy, like when Carlton broke into the studio audience. And that episode aside, it had a lot more emotional and engaging stories to tell. 60 is Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think this is the thing I got into the most recently on this list, and the fact it was nearly able to crack my top 50 already says a lot. This show is one of the funniest I've ever seen, and has a cast that seems impossible to beat. My favorite character switches every episode, I can't stick with one. It also has Terry Crews. It's pretty hard for your show to be bad when he's involved. If I had to pick a favorite though, I guess Rosa. For reasons. 59 is Adventure Time. This show will always be special to me, even if it got pretty dull in the second half. It was the first cartoon with an overarching story that I actually paid attention to. I remember going online and theorizing with everyone about Ice King and about the Mushroom War. It was crazy. I wish we could rewind time back to that point sometimes. People today are too defensive of their theories and treat them like facts. But oh man, the way the show came back with Together Again after that anticlimactic series finale, oh, that just fixed everything. I'll always love you, Adventure Time. Finn is still a bigger simp than Mordecai though. 58 is Super Monkey Ball. A fun and challenging little ball rolling game where you go through courses, collect bananas, and try to reach the goal before time runs out. It's a very simple concept, but I love how much they do with it, with monkey boxing, monkey race, monkey bowling, monkey billiards. I just hope that after the success of the recent remakes we got, they actually make a third game for real, with no gimmicks, no tech demo stuff, just do more of what we've shown we enjoy. A proper Monkey Ball sequel. 57 is OKKO Let's Be Heroes. Despite being heavily influenced by anime and video games and all that other geeky stuff, it's one of the most classic feeling modern Cartoon Network shows. All the Hanna-Barbera sound effects, the pure love it has for its own network with all its different crossovers, and it also has a very unique overarching story. You can either take it seriously, or laugh at all the cliches it intentionally goes for. It also has a very fun, bright, and vibrant art style that's influenced my own art quite a bit. Number 56 is Shrek. What can I say about this film series that hasn't already been said by everyone else before? It's such a fun subversion of Disney's fairy tale formula. There's not really anything I could add to the conversation. My opinions on it line up with everyone else's. Shrek 2 is the best, Shrek 3 is the worst, 4 is better than we initially thought, and 1 is still a classic, even if some parts of it haven't aged too well. I'm just waiting to see what Shrek 5 or the Shrek reboot looks like because we've been hearing about it forever. 55 is Spyro the Dragon. Way back in the early days of the PlayStation, right next to Crash Bandicoot was our favorite Purple Boy. Despite being a 3D platformer like Crash, Spyro was completely different, and hit a completely different sweet spot. Instead of linear levels where the goal was to get from point A to point B, Spyro was more open world and had collection-based gameplay. The levels were all so colorful and diverse, the characters are fun and charming, and all the different gameplay styles they introduced later on worked well too. 54 is The Legend of Zelda. Spawning some of the lamest and most generic video game jokes and memes ever, comes this magical adventure. All kidding aside, Zelda games are great and are like full-on events. They revolutionize and inspire so much in the adventure genre. Enemies dropping loot, hidden treasure behind waterfalls, cracked walls that you can explode with bombs or other weapons so you can find a secret hidden passage. All of the best tropes in exploration games can be traced back to the Zelda series. And I'm glad I've been along for so many of the journeys. 53 is Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Probably one of the most obscure things on this list. It's an Australian 3D platformer, and if they stuck with the formula of the first game, it could have easily competed with the titans of the genre. Ty's controls were very snappy and responsive, the levels were super pretty, his moveset was super unique with all the different boomerangs he could have, and man, that soundtrack. One of my favorites in any game. I haven't tried any of the sequels yet, and I'm not too excited to from what I've heard, but maybe I'll give him a shot. 52 is Frogger. Who doesn't love this classic game of a frog trying to cross the street without getting run over? Now, while I do adore the classic iterations of Frogger, the reason it's this high on my list is for the PlayStation 1 games. They take Frogger's original concept and push it to the absolute limits, with crazy environments and level designs, of course, another incredible soundtrack, and even some super duper fun multiplayer modes. I used to play it with my sister all the time. I have some heavy nostalgia for this series and I revisit it plenty. Number 51 is SpongeBob SquarePants. I love this stupid show. I was telling myself if it doesn't crack my top 50, it has to at least be 51. I refuse to let it go any lower. Just like with Shrek, there's not really much I can say about this series that hasn't already been said, and I agree with most of the common opinions. The first 3 seasons are comedy gold, season 4 and 5 are okay, and the rest are terrible. But man, what a memorable first 3 seasons it was. Nearly every single episode from that era has a meme that pops up today. And we can't forget about that incredible first movie either. Even though he hasn't been very entertaining lately, I hope the little yellow dude never goes away. 50 is Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you're probably surprised at how Sonic even made it on the list, because I pick on him a lot. But that's only because I love Sonic and I know his games can do better. Mediocre game after mediocre game for nearly 2 straight decades, and yet I'm still holding on. That should say it all. I love a lot of the characters in the series, several of the games truly are good, and both of the movies have been really good so far, and I'm super excited for the third one, as well as Sonic Frontiers. 49 is Beavis and Butthead. I don't even know what to say about this series for this video. It's just the pure definition of stupidity. It's just about 2 dumb teenagers hanging out and sharing a singular brain cell, with their only goal in life being to someday score. Sometimes you don't really need a giant shopping list of reasons to like something. And equally, you also don't need a super deep and complex reason. Sometimes some things just make you smile, and that's enough. And that's what Beavis and Butthead is for me. I don't know why I like it, but I just do. 48 is Naruto. This is the very first anime I went out of my way to check out on my own. With something like Attack on Titan, a friend recommended it to me. With One Punch Man, everyone was hyping it up. And sadly, yes, my first exposure to Dragon Ball was through the abridged series. But with Naruto, nobody really told me anything beforehand. I didn't know anything about it, beyond just ninjas. I had no reason to check it out, but I did, and it didn't disappoint. It's so much fun. It has great action, tons of amazing characters that go through incredible arcs, and it has some of the best music I've ever heard in any anime, both for the background soundtracks and the openings. 47 is South Park. I remember getting caught and being in so much trouble for watching this show when I was younger. They used to have some free episodes and clips on their official website, so I'd visit it often, on the family computer. And one day I accidentally left the tabs open when leaving. So when I returned home, it wasn't a very pleasant evening. But despite all the trouble I got in over the show, I just continued to go and watch it. It was incredibly funny, incredibly intelligent, and incredibly daring. And luckily I was smart enough to not imitate any of the things that shouldn't be imitated. The past handful of seasons haven't been too great, but the 17 seasons of classics beforehand more than make up for it. 46 is Geronimo Stilton. Yes, it's a children's book series, but it's also super duper important to me. My grandma used to work at a school library, and she'd always pick up these books for me if she noticed there was a new one. And then she'd read them to me whenever we'd visit, which was pretty frequently. I sadly haven't really been keeping up with them at all because there's just so many and they come out so frequently, but I still have a massive stack of them on the bookshelf in my room. And maybe someday, when I have the money for it, I can hunt down the rest of the books and complete the collection. It also had a cartoon series which was nothing special, but the theme song was pretty cool. Give it a listen if you have time. Number 45 is Bayonetta. This is like No More Heroes if it had 10 times the budget. It has a super crazy wild style, tons of creative characters and weapons, and super fun and in-depth combat. I think it's purely the larger scale of Bayonetta that makes me put it ahead of No More Heroes and this high up on the list. There's so much to do, the story can be taken a lot more seriously, and the harder difficulties are in fact harder and provide a very fun challenge. And Bayonetta actually did make it into Smash Bros. 44 is Nintendo's Punch-Out!, with the Wii game being my personal favorite. Now this is a rhythm and memory game I can get behind. You'd think with the game having so little content and being so short, that it wouldn't have much replay value, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Since it's possible to memorize just about everything in this game, mainly the enemy attack patterns, you can just create your own replay value. People have played the game upside down, played the game with headphones to block out the sound cues, played the game with their feet, played the game blindfolded. There's so many challenges you can make for yourself in this game, and I've taken them all. Haven't beaten it any in those unique ways, but I've gotten pretty far sometimes. It's just such a creatively free franchise, and I really hope Nintendo makes more. Please. 43 is Kingdom Hearts. Disney crossing with Final Fantasy truly is a concept that has a 1 in a million chance of becoming reality. And yet here we are with an entire franchise consisting of 3 mainline games with a 4th one on the way, and countless spin-offs. The main character Sora even made it into Super Smash Bros., yet another crazy crossover. And just as insane as the crossover aspect of the franchise is the story of the franchise. It's not nearly as complex or complicated as everyone makes it out to be, but it's absolutely a trip, and I'm here for every moment. Number 42 is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, both the books and the movies. Now there wasn't anything super duper special about this series, it didn't have that super sweet hidden meaning that Captain Underpants did, and my grandma never read it to me. But it was still just a charming and relatable tale about entering middle school. It was the first book series to make me go, "Oh yeah, books!" And the movie trilogy was pretty great as well. It's super corny and goofy, but as time goes on, I can tell that I'm gonna have some massive nostalgia for them. 41 is How to Train Your Dragon. Now if you're a pet owner, specifically a cat owner, this series is probably super important to you as well. It's just a really sweet and wholesome tale about bonding with a wild animal and realizing that they don't have to be treated like monsters. Now sadly, cynical YouTube movie reviewers slowly nitpicking away at these films because they just have to have a unique opinion of their own instead of just simply enjoying something has ruined them a bit for me. I know it shouldn't, but now that they've pointed out these movies' flaws in such an irritating and condescending tone, they stick out like a sore thumb when I'm just trying to mindlessly watch for fun. But even then, I still enjoy them, and 2 is still the best, no matter what those YouTubers say. 40 is VeggieTales. Now typically in these Christian-oriented shows, they beat you over the head with their message and try to cram it down your throat, even though most of the audience is Christian and already knows the messages. VeggieTales, though, actually knows that, hey, it's a show and you have to be entertaining as well. And I think it does a pretty good job at that. A lot of the jokes are genuinely funny, a lot of the songs are genuinely good, and the animation, despite being early CG, still holds up, mainly because them being vegetables leads to very simplistic designs. But it's never ugly to look at. I think VeggieTales is the best Christian show. 39 is Everybody Hates Chris. One of my mom's favorite shows was Everybody Loves Raymond, and she'd watch it all the time, to the point where it was a bit oversaturated for me, even though I never watched along. So when I noticed Everybody Hates Chris on the TV guide, I figured it was just some kind of parody of Everybody Loves Raymond, making fun of it, so I checked it out of curiosity. But it actually turned out to be based on Chris Rock's life, and it was one of the funniest shows I had ever seen. I own the complete series on DVD now, and once again, it has Terry Crews. Your show's all good if he's in it. I don't hear nearly enough people talk about it though, so please check it out. Number 38 is Toy Story. Ah yes, the classic Pixar franchise. The first 3 movies give such a good message about friendship, loyalty, acceptance, and moving on. And although the 4th movie really did mess things up, it's pretty easy to pretend that it never happened. Aside from the heartwarming movies though, we also got an awesome Buzz Lightyear spin-off cartoon that's way better than the recent Lightyear movie. The video games were pretty decent too, my favorite being Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue on PlayStation 1. 37 is Dragon Ball. Now while I did start this franchise off with the Abridged series, which did ruin some of the tension for me when watching the actual show, because I just kept thinking about the stupid jokes, I still enjoyed it all from start to finish. The charming and adventurous original Dragon Ball series, the tense and high-action Dragon Ball Z, and the flawed but admittedly still fun Dragon Ball Super. And Dragon Ball GT was there too, I guess. And all of the recent movies that have come out have been super duper fun as well, even with some of their poor story quality. 36 is Courage the Cowardly Dog. Now here's another big Cartoon Network classic, but rather than solely focus on comedy, this one focuses on horror and creepiness. The comedy coming from how absurd it can all get, especially with all the creative and unique art style changes. I appreciate how it wasn't afraid to hold back on us, but how it also never went too far. It scared us a lot as kids, but never scarred us, and we'd always return for more. Especially when the episodes were centered around Eustace, you know, the best character in the show. 35 is Sergeant Frog. This anime was recommended to me by an in-person friend, and thank goodness for them because I wouldn't have been able to discover it otherwise. Literally nobody talks about this show, and it's unfortunate because it's a lot of fun. It's one of those animes like Panty and Stocking that feels like it was practically made for the dub. All the fast-paced humor, wacky situations and scenarios, the hyperactive story, pop culture references, the round and soft art style. It's one of those series that feels like it should be super duper mainstream and all over the place, but it just isn't, and that's sad, so give it a watch. 34 is Undertale. Now this series only has one entry, so it's kinda hard to call it a franchise. But I think the community is more than enough to justify it, with all the different AUs they make, all the crazy fan theories, all the fan games, and everything else that just adds on to this already incredible experience of a game. Now all the way back at the beginning of this video when I talked about Final Fantasy, you heard me say I don't like games with turn-based combat, but yet Undertale has it and is this high up on the list. And that's because Undertale does something different in the best way possible. If you feel the same way as I do about RPGs, don't let yourself miss out on this one. Number 33 is Croc. Now this is a childhood favorite of mine, a super underrated and nostalgic 3D platformer. Some video game critics of the past several years have come to the game criticizing it for its tank controls. But it's not as hard to get used to as they make it out to be. I could drop the game for a year, 5 years, or even a whole decade and come back to it still controlling it perfectly fine from the get-go. It's incredibly fun and charming, it has some vibrant and diverse level design, the soundtrack is definitely one of the PS1's best, and it's just adorable, dude. Whenever someone throws out words like scrunkly or scrimblow, Croc is always the first thing to come to my mind. 32 is the Tony Hawk game series, more specifically the Pro Skater series. Not only is the core gameplay really fun with super smooth and responsive controls, but it also has a one-of-a-kind soundtrack full of amazing bands and songs, Plus, it has both a level editor and a character customization mode. And you already know how much me likey customization in my games. Unfortunately, it seems like the remakes of Pro Skater 3 and 4 have been cancelled, but maybe someday someone else will take over and breathe it back to life. 31 is Avatar: The Last Airbender. I thought about lumping Korra in here too, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it, so it's specifically Aang's story. And man, what a story it is. Many people raised this series up as the greatest cartoon ever made, and I don't blame them. It has breathtaking animation, the world of the series is so diverse and fleshed out, it's full of amazing characters who go on incredible journeys, and I love just about all of it as well. I am a little less tolerant of the filler episodes than others, and there are quite a bit, but whenever the plot is actually moving forward, I'm all in. 30 is the Total Drama series. Now putting this above Avatar: The Last Airbender is going to be very controversial, and I am completely expecting to be obliterated in the comments for this. I mean, look at Total Drama. The super flat and simplistic art style, the cheap and rigged animation, the lowbrow fart and gross out humor. How dare I? Now look, I completely acknowledge that Avatar is in fact an amazing story, but I do skip a lot of the filler as it doesn't provide the dumb stupid fun that I love whenever plot isn't happening. But with Total Drama, the dumb stupid fun is the plot, and I never skip an episode when watching over it again. 29 is King of the Hill. If Avatar is the avatar of storytelling cartoons, and Total Drama is the avatar of fun and stupid cartoons, then King of the Hill is the avatar of super relaxing and slice-of-life cartoons. I never grew up in Texas specifically, but I was still born in the South, in that same redneck hillbilly territory, so some of the characters and scenarios you run into in this show are very relatable to me. Nothing insane or crazy ever really happens in this show, it's just people living their lives, but that's okay, it's still very entertaining. Good characters, good vibes, it's a good show. Yup. 28 is Invincible. Continuing with the trend of the past couple entries, this is the avatar of superhero or overly violent cartoons, I guess. I got into this show solely because it was from Robert Kirkman, the same mind behind The Walking Dead. It even stars Steven Yeun, the actor for Glenn from The Walking Dead, as Mark, our main character here. And I gotta say, both Robert Kirkman and Steven Yeun are 2 for 2 here. It's an amazing story, filled with tons of characters voiced by incredibly talented actors. And it's full of so many twists, turns, and subversions of the superhero genre. It'll always keep you on your toes. 27 is Rayman, another PlayStation classic. Before Crash Bandicoot inspired all these other 3D platformers to make their return with the Insane Trilogy, Rayman was over there doing his own thing with the Origins and Legends games. And what an amazing pair of games they were, it was almost as if he never left. The quality was right up there with his original games on the PS1 and PS2. His franchise honestly could have gone on for way longer, there was so much potential. But nope, it got destroyed yet again by the Rabbids. His latest game turns a decade old next year, so it's kind of hard to have hope, but we just need to stay strong for Rayman. 26 is Monsters Inc., my favorite Pixar series. Now everyone already knows what a heartwarming and great tale the first movie is, but I want to point out how good the prequel Monsters University is too, because I think it gets a bit too much hate. I saw a video that related Mike's predicament of not being scary to having a disability. And it actually makes so much sense, it makes the movie feel so real. Sometimes, no matter how hard you work for something or how hard you dream for something, it can just never be because of how you are. As I've said in this video before, I'm disabled too. I have albinism. If my dream was to win a seeing things contest or a not burn in the sun contest, I'd lose no matter how hard I trained. It's just how it is sometimes. But that's okay because you can still make your life great in so many other ways. So Mike's journey in Monsters University just hits really close to home for me, so I love the whole franchise. Even the Disney Plus series is decent. 25 is Grand Theft Auto. The stories of these games are always great, full of political satire and social commentary. But that's not what you buy the game for. You get the game for all the destruction, chaos, and mayhem that you can cause. Taking any vehicle you can spot, including spy cars, tanks, attack helicopters. But I was actually pretty surprised to find just how sick the online was too. I figured it was just gonna be more of the same, with multiple people in the open world instead of just you by yourself. But there's tons to do. There's a whole business meta, ways to earn loads of money in no time at all without having to spend any real money, and countless minigames and events, including a racing series where you can make your own racetracks. Ooh, customization. 24 is Jak and Daxter. Time for some more PlayStation classics. It started off as a bright and colorful open-world 3D platformer like so many others before it. But the very moment that the sequels landed, it got hit with a gritty post-apocalyptic reboot aesthetic. And I loved it. Though the entire tone and core of the series changed, some elements remained similar the whole time, like Daxter, the best character. And all the heart that the series had, telling an incredible story. Number 23 is Rooster Teeth's Death Battle. Now I'm pretty sure at the very beginning of this video when you saw me include YouTube franchises with Clay World, you just knew that this was going to show up on the list somewhere too, and it made it to the top quarter. It's just a fun show that compares the canonical strengths, weaknesses, and abilities of very different characters across all of fiction to see who would win in a fight. Multiple series on this list were introduced to me by this very show, and it's also how I met some of my closest online friends. The show has been going on for over 10 years now, which is pretty crazy for an online series, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the future. 22 is Genshin Impact. I've been talking about this game a lot on my channel recently, even though I have been playing it for a good half a year now. I was just too focused on it to make content because it was so fun. Catching up with everything there is to do, rolling for characters, building those characters, competing in challenges and events, completing quests, cooking, crafting, exploration and treasure hunting, customizing islands and tea houses. There's just so much. All I can really say is thank goodness I'm a cheapskate. Because if you're able to avoid and ignore all the gacha traps it tries to lure you into, this could easily be considered one of the best free-to-play games ever made. 21 is BoJack Horseman. Now from first glance at this picture, you'd assume it's nothing more than just another adult comedy, with the crude drawing of the drunk horse and all that. And for the first handful of episodes, you'd be correct, but that's an intentional misdirection. The show quickly grows into this very deep story about a washed-up content creator. He's trying to get back on his feet, but he's chained down pretty hard by his past. These chains are pretty much self-inflicted though, as he's not really a good person and you're not supposed to root for him. He makes mistake after mistake, blowing every chance to get better. There is no real end goal to this story. It's just a tale that exposes how gross Hollywood is, the struggles of intergenerational trauma, representations of substance abuse and addiction, and it's one of the most accurate portrayals of mental health ever put into a show. I'm gonna give a warning though, this show is not an easy watch. It's the only show, or any piece of media really on this entire list, that has ever given me panic attacks. It is some pretty heavy stuff, but the fact that a piece of media can even do that to me at all is enough to make it stick with me forever. 20 is Codename Kids Next Door. Here's a nice and comforting contrast to that depressing BoJack segment. This is one of the most creative cartoons I've ever seen. It has such a detailed and fleshed out concept and does so much with it. And it does so despite not relying on magic or supernatural stuff like other cartoons. It's just a team of spy-like kids fighting evil adults with cheap technology they built themselves. It's a sweet and wholesome show with a pretty nice story, and it's a shame that the sequel series, Galactic Kids Next Door, never got picked up. Maybe someday. Number 19 is Lilo and Stitch. This has gotta be my favorite Disney franchise. Even just for Stitch alone. He's such a fun and well-designed character. But the fact that he's also in such a heartwarming and amazing movie surrounded by incredible and colorful characters just makes it all even better. He also has multiple sequels to his movie, most of which are good, and a TV series, which was also pretty great. It's such a huge franchise, yet maintains such a high level of quality throughout the entire thing. There's also even a Stitch anime where he was voiced by Joseph Joestar, but let's pretend that doesn't exist. 18 is Infinity Train, a unique little anthology series. Anthology meaning that each book, or season, tells a completely different story with completely different characters, only being loosely connected with each other. What I love about this show is how unafraid it was to be mature. Despite the network behind it wanting an entry point for a younger audience, the show stuck to its guns and told a very deep and interesting story. No matter how many times I watch the show, its big moments always get to me. Even when I know they're coming. The storytelling is just so powerful here. I made a video ranking all 4 books, so check that out if you want. And if you haven't checked out the show before that, then definitely do so. 17 is Ape Escape, another PlayStation classic. Can you tell which console I grew up with yet? This was a very unique game, the first on the system to utilize the dual analog stick control scheme. Despite the game pretty much being one big tech demo, it was full of so much personality and life. You go around as an anime protagonist with all these super cool gadgets that you use to hunt down these wacky cartoon monkeys, each with their own names, personalities, and descriptions, before they go back in time and change history to where monkeys rule the world. It was a pretty wacky and out there plot, even for a late 90s game. The sequels were amazing as well, and hopefully someday we'll get a true Ape Escape 4. No more motion control tech demo stuff, please. What's with all these PlayStation franchises just stopping? 16 is Gorillaz, a music franchise. Ooh. The gorillas are a virtual band, but not like Hatsune Miku. The gorillas still use real voices. Outside of their countless incredible songs and albums, the gorillas are just goofy cartoon characters and get into all kinds of trouble outside their music. As silly as it sounds, there's actually an entire lore behind this band. And because of that, it became the first and pretty much only band where I actually paid close attention to when new songs and albums come out, because I want to see what happens next with these guys. We're gonna get a Netflix movie about the gorillas apparently, but the last time we heard about it was almost 2 years ago at this point, so who knows? Guess we'll have to wait. 15 is Portal. Portal is a fun and creative puzzle game that forces you to use your head sometimes. I mean, having a gun that shoots holes that you can travel through to get to different parts of the map back and forth leads to a lot of potential. And the game really lives up to that potential with all kinds of other elements, like gels with different effects, gravity beams, laser bridges, and even boss battles with evil robots that hang from the ceiling, evil robots with tons of personality. Aside from the game itself being fun, it also has a really good story attached to it. Lots of hidden lore, and each new robotic face you come across on your journey is guaranteed to not be boring. I've heard little hints and rumors here and there in the past couple years about a third game possibly being made, but I don't want to get my hopes up too high. Fingers crossed though. 14 is Looney Tunes. How can you not love these classic legends? Everyone's got their own favorites. It's either Bugs himself, Daffy, Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, or maybe some obscure Looney Tune that's only gotten 3 or 4 shorts. My personal favorite is either Porky Pig or Foghorn Leghorn. Foghorn because I know so many people in person just like him. And aside from the original shorts, there's also some fantastic reboots like the Looney Tunes show or the current set of shorts on HBO Max. And don't forget the spin-offs either, like Tiny Toons and Animaniacs. There's so many diverse and creative characters here and they can fit in just about any situation. I'm always happy to see Looney Tunes. 13 is Popeye the Sailor Man, another huge classic cartoon series. The animation is always very pretty and I love how creative it can get with some of the fighting. And I know Popeye sounds like he smokes 24/7, but I always found his voice kind of pleasing to listen to, if that makes any sense. And I don't even mind his singing. The reason this is above Looney Tunes is because it doesn't need a bunch of reboots or revivals to keep my attention. I could watch the same handful of classic shorts over and over and never get bored. The same is true for Looney Tunes, though I do get the urge to mix things up sometimes when watching, but Popeye, however, should always stay the same. Number 12 is Psychonauts. Growing up, I would always see bits and pieces of this game in those top 10 creepy things and non-horror video games countdowns, which was due to one of the Easter eggs in the game. And one day a decade and a half later, I just happened to have some extra money on a gift card and decided to pick it up for PS4. Now I can finally see that creepy Easter egg with my own eyes, and I love my 3D platformers, I'm sure I'll have a fun time while getting there. But what I wasn't expecting was an incredible story about mental health and fighting your inner demons. The game has a super gorgeous Tim Burton lookalike world, tons of fun characters that you want to help out, and some of the most creative level design you'll ever find in any video game. And all of those things are even more true in the sequel, which came out at a time when I really needed it. And because of that, it's even become one of my favorite games of all time. It means so much to me, and I really hope we get to see more of Raz in the future. 11 is Super Smash Bros. What can I say about this series that hasn't already been said? It's already just a fantastic and in-depth platform fighter on its own, but what makes it even better is that it's one giant Nintendo crossover, with loads of guests from other video games too. It has Cloud from Final Fantasy, Sonic the Hedgehog, Kazuya from Tekken, Sora from Kingdom Hearts, and many other stars of game series that you've seen on this list. Even when a trailer comes out for this game, it's a huge event, just wondering who's gonna show up next and if it's gonna be one of your favorites. And even if it's not one of your favorites, it could lead to you discovering a new series that you'd like. And either way, you'll have a cool new character to play with whether you're connected to them or not. This is just a magical game series that I don't really think anything else could recapture. Starting off the top 10 is 10, The Walking Dead. Now, the only thing I really heard about this show before even watching it was that it's gone on for too long and it needs to just end. It's not what it used to be, yada yada yada. But they added a character from the show into my favorite fighting game, so I had to watch. But as it turns out, it's a great show, and it's not afraid to just be full-on brutal. It's tense, it's engaging, and it's actually very motivating to see how these characters still have hope despite the terrible situations they get into. I ended up loving the show, and it's become one of my top favorites. And it's not like the character who showed up in my favorite fighting game carried the show for me because they don't show up until like season 7. It's just genuinely good to me, no matter what anyone else says. I think they're just angry because one of their favorite characters got quote-unquote written off. 9 is Smiling Friends. Now this one entered my top 10 before the series even started. Just the pilot alone was enough to capture my attention this much. I was already a massive fan of one of the masterminds behind this show, Zach Hadel, since he started pretty much. His style of humor is like exactly my favorite kind, and it really shines through in this show. Despite being an adult cartoon, it's not overly graphic or violent or gross. They don't rely on pop culture references and swearing 24/7. The creators are just super confident in what they think is funny, and they just go for it, and it works. It's an adult cartoon that doesn't pander, it's an adult cartoon where the characters actually like each other, and it's an adult cartoon that treats you like an adult. That is extremely rare to find these days. Smiling Friends truly is something special, and I hope the creators get to continue making it as long as they want to. 8 is Hajime no Ippo, my favorite anime of all time. I never assumed a sports anime would be my kind of thing, even if it was a fighting sport. But with the way the series radiates its pure love of boxing, I just couldn't resist. All of the characters are very charming, each boxer's story makes you want to root for them, even the ones going up against our protagonist. It has some of the best sound design I've ever heard in anything, and the action is fantastic. You really feel the weight of every single punch, and the stress the boxers go through leading up to their match. This series pretty much has the best training montages and arcs of all time. Sure, in Dragon Ball it's pretty cool to see Goku training at 100 times Earth's gravity so he can shoot a slightly bigger Kamehameha at some crazy space monster. But seeing Takamura nearly go insane from starvation and dehydration just to make weight for a fight is something else. The intense struggle and the drive to push through it that each boxer has in this series is so motivating, and I love it for that. 7 is That 70s Show. Set in the decade of the best music ever made, comes a sitcom about teens doing teen things. Yeah, there's actually nothing super crazy that goes on in this show. It's just a coming-of-age story. Wanting to rebel your parents, grow up and be your own person, get away and start your life. But it does so with great characters, hilarious jokes, and fantastic actors who actually got their start here, like Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis. With how down-to-earth and relatable everything feels, it's pretty hard not to get attached. The story is set 2 decades before I was even born, and yet nothing in the show feels alien to me. It's pretty comforting, and it's probably my most rewatched show of all time. 6 is Invader Zim. This is a pretty dark and disturbing family show. Nothing else was quite like it at the time. And that's probably because it was so ahead of its time. It's way more popular nowadays than it ever was when it first started. Random humor, morbid humor, social commentary, it had it all. The main cast of characters is pretty small, but they're all unforgettable. The over-the-top and overconfident Zim, the wacky and all-over-the-place Gur, the super paranoid Dib, and his spooky, scary, gloomy sister Gaz. All wrapped up in a unique, bleak, and melancholy art style with striking and angular character designs. This show has had such a heavy influence on my sense of humor and my art style, there's no way I could leave it off the top 10. 5 is Team Fortress. More specifically, Team Fortress 2. I never played the original Team Fortress. Which should tell you how good TF2 is, the fact it was able to get in my top 5 despite only playing TF2. I don't think there's a single other first-person shooter out there that can even come close to matching the personality that this game has. Each weapon class is so diverse and has a unique character behind them, with an entire crowd of millions upon millions of fans. Whereas with most games, it's pretty easy to figure out who the objectively most loved and least loved characters are by the community. With Team Fortress 2, it's next to impossible, with each character being believable as the fan favorite. This is also the free-to-play game that I've put the most money into, probably about $100. Now, $100 over the 10 plus years I've been playing this game doesn't really seem like a lot. But then again, I am a huge cheapskate, so that's a pretty big deal for me. I've put so many hours into this game as well, and with Valve finally noticing it again, and updating it again, I can't wait to put in many more. 4 is Regular Show, my favorite cartoon of all time. With other shows and cartoons on this list, they've influenced my art style, my sense of humor, and so on. Regular Show, however, has just influenced me, meaning that if this show had never existed, I doubt that I would be the same person that I am today. It's a show that really helps you learn how to live in the moment, how to enjoy the mundane, how to find excitement and happiness in a dead-end job and a life you perceive to be mediocre, how to grow as a person just by spending your days with people who are good for you. I know that sounds sappy, but I can think of very specific moments that helped. For example, Rigby's arc, where he went back to high school at the age of 28 or 29 and graduated, showing that it's never too late to improve yourself. Even if you're approaching 30 or maybe already past 30 years old, you can still set and reach goals. You have plenty of time. And on top of all these deep thoughts and the personal and comforting feelings this show gives me, it's just really funny, dude. I could replay the same 5 seconds of any joke in this show over and over and still keep laughing until my face is red. It's really just a jolly good show. Number 3 is Kung Fu Panda. Just as Regular Show influenced me to improve myself, Kung Fu Panda influenced me to love myself. There is no secret ingredient. To make something special, you just have to believe it's special. And that includes yourself. It's such a simple message, but this movie conveys it in such a potent and powerful way. It's definitely my favorite and most watched movie series, and like regular show, on top of all these heartwarming and meaningful messages, it's just funny. The characters are incredible, the animation is stunning, especially during the action scenes. And no joke, in the middle of recording this, I looked away to take a sip of water, and turned my back to see Twitter refresh as DreamWorks just announced Kung Fu Panda 4 in a tweet. Normally, I'd laugh and say what a funny little coincidence, but as you all know, there are no accidents. This is destiny. Number 2 is Crash Bandicoot. I wouldn't blame you if you figured this would be my number 1. It was the main focus of my channel for a good couple years. I still talk about it lots, it was an important part of my childhood, and I still of course play and enjoy every game to this very day. There's also a lovely and not so lovely community surrounding this series, and I've made some pretty nice friends in it. When it comes to this franchise, I'm always going to be looking forward to news, looking back on fond memories, and enjoying what the series is offering now. While we're just waiting on news of this elusive Wumpa League, it's really nice to see all of the fans coming together to comfort each other and reassure each other that the Bandicoot is okay. He's just taking his time with this one. And number 1 is Tekken. When making this list, I thought it was going to be a pretty rough battle between Crash and Tekken for the number 1 spot. But when I actually wrote it all down and thought about it, it became a much easier choice. With Crash Bandicoot, as much as I love it, I always have to keep my guard up. Is the franchise gonna fade out again? Is the next game gonna be mediocre? Is Activision gonna cram microtransactions into it? Is the fanbase gonna be divided over it? But when it comes to Tekken, I don't need to brace myself at all. Not only is this franchise always there for me, but it never disappoints. Even when there's objectively bad parts about it like the movies, I still enjoy them and have a good time. The gameplay is always fun, even though I'm terrible at it. I love following the story, as ridiculous and absurd as it is. And it's what really kicked this channel into high gear with the reveal of Tekken 7. It's kinda funny how the Tekken 7 reveal started things off on this channel, and now things are gonna slow down heavily right when Tekken 8 is being teased. And see what I mean about this franchise always being there for me? I'm pretty bummed out that things will have to slow down on this channel, but Tekken 8's right there to cheer me up. And we're even getting a Tekken anime on the day this video releases. Not only am I able to gush to you about how much I love this series, but you're literally getting live proof from the series itself for my reasoning why. Tekken is my number 1 favorite franchise. And done. Oh boy. This video was something else. But let me know what you guys think. What are some franchises you're interested in now after hearing me talk about them? And if you're brave enough, let me know what your top 100 franchises are. I'll be sure to read them in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time. Leopold the Brave, out.